Burnout is often identified as just an individual issue, but it is not because burnout affects people, teams, and entire organizations. And so, yes, it does affect the individual people and professionals in ways that they start to question themselves, right? So we've been exploring over the last three months how burnout and chronic stress can destroy your purpose and your identity of who you are. It makes you question, am I really doing what I'm supposed to be? And sometimes saying, I don't know if I can keep going on. And that is where it affects the individual, right? Because there are things that individuals that we all do it, I did it, I was at fault, that affect why you might get burnt out. But it's more of a systemic issue in that in the workplace culture, the culture, and if the culture is of hustle, do more, stay late, be accessible all the time, that's going to lead to individual team members getting burnt out. And then there's going to be conflict because teams can't communicate right. And the list goes on. We've also talked about the how stress affects your psychological health. So your mental state, your brain fog, the ability of your brain to function in the way it is supposed to. And we've also talked about how stress impacts the biological function of your body and what that does, right? And how it disrupts the normal state and normal functions your body automatically does every day. And so let's kind of break this down as we recap each of these areas from the last 3 months. So when it comes to personal experiences of burnout, remember this is you as a professional and what you're experiencing. So if you've been in a state of chronic stress for too long, meaning multiple weeks in a row, it is nonstop, you're going to start to feel like you've disconnected from your work and sometimes feel like you're disconnecting from yourself. And the disconnect from yourself comes in because your focus is so external about everything around you and how do I get through this situation? How do I get back to a sense of normalcy as I hear? You've disconnected from what is going on inside your body, and you're not going to notice that your body's giving you signs that you're burnt out. You're also going to notice that your identity feels drained because you're questioning your purpose, right? And I hear this all the time from clients that come in. They go, I didn't think the work would be like this. I don't know if I can keep going. Or I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but I can't sustain this, right? And that's where you're starting to question what you're doing. I do at times hear, I don't think I'm in the right field, but I don't know how to figure it out, and I don't feel like I can get out. These are all signs that you've been in a state of chronic stress or burnout for too long. If you're emotionally exhausted and getting enough rest at night or rest after vacation is not helping, then you are experiencing burnout as a professional and on that individual level. And that's also going to show up because your motivation's gone. So you're going to fall back to doing the bare minimum, right? I'm going to do what I have to just to get through, and I'm not going to do more. And most high performers, you're going to push through and do the extra because that's who you are and that's how you're driven. But high performers are also going to internalize that stress, meaning I'm going to just shove it down as far as I can instead of addressing it at the root cause and working to change that, right? So, as a professional, yes, you might be experiencing burnout, and I encourage you to pay attention to those signs because noticing those signs and staying connected to your body are going to be the first steps to getting out of burnout. And this is the first step I always walk my clients through in my coaching program is get that self-awareness. Stay connected to your body, to what's going on in your mind and all of that information that's coming in so you can do something different. We've also got the organizational side, right? And what companies are, how they're contributing to this burnout state that's happening across our organization. And I've also seen this is rampant in our workforce today where The workplace culture and the leadership behaviors are influencing stress levels. So what do I mean by that? Workplace culture, meaning what's acceptable behavior and what is expected, right? Which comes from leaders. That's going to drive either sustainable teams or it's going to drive teams to become burnt out. So it's about expectations, it's about workloads, it's about, is the culture positive? Are employees feeling heard and listened to when they speak up and say, this isn't sustainable, right? That impacts how um, how burnt out teams get and whether or not turnover is going to start happening. Leadership behaviors play in not only with the expectations they set, but the behaviors they model. So, as a leader, are you also pushing into the hustle culture and starting to get burnt out yourself? And I can tell you, if you're a high performing leader, you probably are. I did it. It's natural to keep pushing because you want to perform and you're so focused on the output and tied to your identity. But employees follow leaders, and we have to remember that. We have to model the behaviors that we want to see. When teams are overwhelmed because the pressure keeps coming, the projects keep coming, they're going to get burnt out, right? If priorities are unclear, but priorities keep getting accelerated and pushed, burnout gets worse. And so what that means is I've seen this multiple times, right? In organizations where admit more people when I worked in a psych hospital. Admit, but yet the milieu is not stabilized. You cannot keep admitting patients to a unit that is not stable. It causes more chaos and causes employees and leaders to function in a state of chronic stress and burnout where they can't keep going. They're not functioning because they're not responding well. And so it's determining what are the priorities and being clear and sticking to them, right? And the reality is managers often experience some of the highest levels of stress. And that is because not only do they have their own workload to take care of and to follow through and perform, right? Managers are also overseeing employees, making sure that employees and direct care staff are getting their work done and they have what they need to get their work done. But we've also got the other side where managers have to support higher leadership in the organization mission. And so managers have this pressure from both sides while also still trying to do their own tasks, and that can cause a lot of extra stress. The third area that we've been talking about is the science of stress and burnout and how this specifically affects your brain and your body, right? So your brain changes because of chronic stress. So chronic stress, again, puts your body and your mind into that fight or flight. So your ability to reason and make decisions and problem solve stops working, right? It just goes offline because if your body is not sensing safety, that's considered a non-essential function. And so people start experiencing brain fog. They're like, I can't make decisions. I'm just fatigued all the time. Yes, because chronic stress is changing how your brain is functioning. Stress and burnout also affects your nervous system, right? It dysregulates. So when we talk about the nervous system, we're talking about what you're feeling and experiencing in your body. And this is where a lot of people feel like they're always on edge. They might be shaky, which can be experienced such as anxiety. Very similar there. Being on edge, so just waiting for that next shoe to drop, kind of trying to brace your body for whatever's going to come next. That's affecting your nervous system, right? The nerves that send signals through your body. You're also going to recognize or notice that you're both emotionally and cognitively fatigued. Cognitive fatigue just means that your brain feels very foggy. You don't feel like you can think clearly. Like you just don't have a lot of brain power to do what you need to for the day. And that's because you've been in stress for too long. And emotionally, you feel like you're just being reactive or just so exhausted that it's hard to connect to those joyful feelings. And so we have to consider that Burnout isn't solved just with motivation. We have to implement some other things in order to create that sustainable recovery so you can maintain your performance level and the life you want long term, right? It's not just about performing at work, but it's about having a sustainable, successful life in all aspects of life. So, family, finances, um, things that you enjoy, hobbies, and work. And so, how do we create that sustainable recovery? First of all, and I talk to a lot of clients about this, we have to start with awareness because if we're not aware of what's truly going on, we don't see what the problem is, and we don't identify the root, we can't implement the most effective recovery practices because the specific recovery practices might be slightly different for each person because it also depends on, is stress showing up more in your physical body on your nervous system, or is it more of showing up more in how your brain's functioning, right? That cognitive aspect and how we recover from both is slightly different. But we have to start with that awareness and recognizing it within yourself. As leaders, for anybody that is a leader, it also requires engaging in behaviors that protect not only your capacity, but those that you supervise. Because the only ones that can protect that capacity is leadership, right? And capacity is how much you can absorb and how much you can actually accomplish effectively and efficiently. And then we also, at the organizational level, for companies, you have to implement some sustainable systems that help employees and your entire workforce as a team reduce that chronic stress. Because if they're not being supported to reduce that stress, they're not going to perform and accomplish what you're wanting them to accomplish. But there are ways at all three levels that we can create sustainable recovery. Now, if you're saying, great, Deidre, this sounds good, but I don't know where to start, I hear you. And that's why I've created an assessment for both professionals on the individual level and for businesses on the organizational level to determine what is going on, right? So, on the professional level, how stressed and burnt out am I? It's just an insight tool, right? These are designed to help you understand and detect those early signs. On the organizational level, it's saying, what do I need to pay attention to that's going on here, right? Is it reduced turnover? Is it people are calling out all the time? Like, what's going on? And that's what these assessments are designed for. They're free. The links will be linked below, but it's just a starting point to determine what is going on so then you can start that recovery and change process. Because remember, burnout is predictable when stress goes unmanaged. So if stress is not managed and it stays that way for a long time, burnout will show up. But it is preventable when both individuals and organizations respond intentionally. So it is something that we can reverse. And that is the mission I am on, is to help people not get burnt out, either prevent it or recover from it, because recovery is possible. We can build sustainable performance habits.